Hello, I am Bob Gold, the Superintendent for Big Hollow School District 38. As many of you are aware, Big Hollow Middle School has long offered accelerated course options in both English Language Arts and Math. Each year, decisions regarding if and how students qualify for the accelerated placement courses, such as accelerated math in 6th grade, have traditionally been hot topics with our students and families. So I want to thank you for taking the time today to listen and watch our presentation about our updated accelerated placement processes. For the past 2 years, the district has been working to align our assessment practices and instructional delivery models to ensure that we are adequately supporting the various learners in our district. The result of this work is that today we have an accelerated placement system established that includes multiple layers of data to support the placement recommendations. I have asked Dr. Hetrovicz and Dr. King to oversee this work, and they have done an outstanding job putting this together. I firmly believe that the process that we have gone through to get to this point and the resulting process that's in place will serve as a model for other districts to follow. We are excited to share the outcome of this work with you now. Later this week and next week, you will be receiving notification if your child is being placed into an accelerated English Language Arts and/or math course next school year. Before you receive these notifications, we want to provide you information about the criteria for placement in the accelerated courses.
This presentation will cover past accelerated course placement practices for English Language Arts and Math at the middle school, district-wide work around our guaranteed and viable curriculum and standards-based grading, our work around multi-tiered system of supports, and the new accelerated course placement practices for English Language Arts and Math at that middle school. The past practice for accelerated placement into English Language Arts was MAP achievement score and teacher recommendation. The MAP achievement was based on a RIT cutoff, and the teacher recommendation was based on learner characteristics such as endurance and persistence during difficult learning and motivation and willingness to persevere. But these were not normed recommendations. For math, we also used MAP achievement score as the solitary source of data, except for those students who failed in Algebra 1 in 7th grade. They were ineligible for geometry. The MAP achievement was based on the spring RIT cutoff, and no teacher recommendations were used. These new criteria for placement into accelerated math and ELA align with our district-wide work. Dr. Hetrovicz has been working with staff to ensure that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which is the single most important initiative a school or district can engage in to raise student achievement. She's also been working with staff to develop common formative assessments so that we can consistently ensure the standards and proficiency standards that are happening in the classrooms are used by teachers to inform instruction and differentiate for students. We've been working with Northwestern to ensure that our teachers are trained for talented and gifted learners. Even though not all students will be placed in our accelerated courses, they will have access to strong differentiated learning opportunities and associated rigorous resources. I have been working with Dr. Hetrovicz and Dr. Pittman to work with our MTSS process, and that's what we're going to discuss now. The superintendent requested that I formalize a district-wide multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS for short, for students in grades K through 8, thereby aligning assessment instruments, progress monitoring, and responses to the academic and social-emotional needs and strengths of our entire student population. To that end, I have been working in coordination with Dr. Pittman, the Director of Student Services for the district, and Dr. Hetrovicz to complete this work. Through this process, we are identifying the areas that we can be providing interventions and enriching learning experiences that are specific to the strengths and needs of every student in every classroom. Some very important distinctions that we will repeat throughout this conversation is that not all students will meet the criteria for certain interventions or enrichments. In fact, just like there are only 10 to 15% of each grade level receiving intensive interventions, only 10 to 15% of each grade level will be placed in accelerated courses, as the core curriculum is sufficient to meet the needs of our learners and challenging enough for each of them as well. Unlike previous years, our criteria took multiple academic and social-emotional developmental data into consideration for identifying students who would be excellent candidates for the new accelerated English language art courses. Those measures included the COGAT, which measures students' learned reasoning and problem-solving abilities through a battery of verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal test items. That's an online assessment completed by the students. We use the DESA, which is a standardized strength-based social-emotional learning assessment that measures the social and emotional competence of youth in kindergarten through 8th grade, completed by staff and families. The MAP growth tests were also used, which are overall subject scores and gives us information on instructional areas for reading under vocabulary, literary text, and informational text. The MAP is an adaptive online assessment completed by students. We also use the PCA, which is the Profile of Creative Abilities, and it's a measure of creative ability. It is specifically designed to identify students gifted in the area of creative thinking, and this rating scale was completed by families. And finally, we use Renzulli scales, which are research-based scales to identify the characteristics of talented and high ability students. We use the most commonly applied scales for the identification of talented and gifted students for learning, creativity, motivation, and leadership. And these are online rating scales completed by staff. Using those instruments that I just described, we specifically applied the following decision rules to identify students for accelerated ELA placement. All of these scores, with the exception of Renzulli scores, have been mailed home throughout the school year. But even the Renzulli scores alone would not preclude a student from meeting the criteria for placement into accelerated ELA. The final recommendation status is based on the total points derived from a composite of the criteria previously mentioned. This table illustrates the recommendation status and whether or not the student has been accepted into accelerated ELA course for the 21-22 school year. These recommendations are based on both academic and social-emotional developmental indicators. You may notice that recommended and accepted with reservations is also a status. Students with this placement are accepted into the program because they have met the minimum criteria, but families should be aware that an average to low average score may be the outcome for this course. For example, a student may have a high achievement score but lower scores in the areas of persistence, personal commitment to long-term projects, or sustained interest in non-self-selected topics. Or, conversely, a student may have lower academic abilities, but a strong ability to articulate ideas and takes personal responsibility to follow through difficult projects. Both students may be recommended for the program with reservations because both met the criteria, but both students may struggle due to the demanding readings and the course content, or the lack of stamina and persistence required when the learning does not come easily. As previously shared, not all students will meet the criteria for certain interventions or enrichments, and only 10 to 15% of each grade level will be placed into accelerated courses as the core curriculum is sufficient to meet the needs and challenge learners because we have solidified the priority standards. Because of the district-wide work that Dr. Hetrovicz is leading the staff through, we are confident the accelerated courses will be much more rigorous and challenging than any other school year prior to the 21-22 school year. So, whereas we currently have multiple sections of the accelerated ELA at each grade level, we now will only have one section per grade level. This concludes the portion about the accelerated ELA information. The next section will focus on accelerated math courses. For our new accelerated math process, we have one level for accelerated math at 6th grade. It covers both 6th grade Common Core standards and 7th grade Common Core standards. We have two different courses for accelerated math at the 7th grade. We have pre-algebra, which covers 7th and 8th grade standards, and algebra 1, which covers standards for algebra 1 and 8th grade Common Core standards. And finally, we have two different courses for accelerated math at 8th grade. Algebra 1, Again, it covers standards for 8th grade and Algebra 1, and geometry, which covers all geometry standards. Like ELA, we are using multiple criteria to find students who will be most successful in our accelerated math courses. We will be using NWEA achievement scores, which are the typical MAT-RIP scores that you've seen in the past. But we will also use conditional growth indexes, which will allow us to see how well students grow over time. We will look at their instructional areas in MAP, specifically for real and complex numbers and algebraic thinking. And we will also consider DESA, which again is the social emotional strength-based ability screener. As you can see here, 7th grade follows a similar pattern for pre-algebra and Algebra 1 placement into accelerated courses. We should also discuss that we used multiple years of winter and spring if we noticed that some growth was impacted due to the pandemic and students may have missed some critical standards. And so we want to ensure that our students would be successful both based on these entrance criteria, but that we're also reflecting on previous growth before the pandemic. Something that's important to think about is that Dr. Hetrovicz and I have been having ongoing conversations with the high school. And based on Dr. Hetrovitz's work and best practice, we've made adjustments to the critical standards that are being taught in each course for our accelerated placement. And because of this, we have addressed and changed some of the priority standards that are being covered in each of these sections. So students will be experiencing standards in such a way that they'll be successful at the high school, more successful than they may have previously been in other years due to our guaranteed and viable curriculum work that is taking place in district and our strong conversations with the high school. So just like for ELA, while we currently have multiple sections of accelerated courses for math at each grade level, that will no longer be the case moving forward. We will only have one section of each accelerated course per grade level. So to summarize our overall presentation, we hope that we covered our past practices for placing students into accelerated math and ELA courses, some of the district-wide work we are doing to ensure that moving forward, our courses look significantly different than they have in the past, and that we are using our guaranteed and viable curriculum to ensure that all of the students that we have in our courses are experiencing rigor and challenge to the degree that they will be successful in, but that specifically these accelerated courses will look and feel very different for students moving forward. Finally, within the next couple of weeks, like Mr. Gold said at the beginning of this presentation, you are going to be receiving placement letters about where your students will be placed if they are in accelerated courses now and no longer meet criteria to be in those accelerated courses, or we are inviting them to participate in accelerated courses. If you have any questions about where your students land in any of these achievement scores, please refer to the letters that have been previously sent home from the middle school, or log on to Otis using your student's unique code to review their data online. If you have any questions about them, please refer to this presentation again, or you can always feel free to reach out. Thank you. And on behalf of Dr. Hetrovicz, Mr. Gold, myself, and the entire middle school team, we thank you for listening to this presentation.